Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. This afternoon's show is going to be about mind control. If all goes according to plan, I will speak very little and just play a lot of clips this afternoon. But first, let me read a little bit from a book called The Goblet of Truth, written by Edward Albert Meyer. And it talks about this issue of electronic data chips and mind control. Therefore, as never before in the history of earthly humanity, lying and deception, as well as deceit, falseness, as well as servitude through government will be held as the truth, and an ever greater calamity will be built upon it. And it will be increasingly the case that you people will be treated like animals for the slaughter, implanted with electronic data chips by means of which you will be controlled and robbed of your freedom by authorities, public offices, and governments. Although in your ignorance you will think that you live as free people, though you are in fact servants of the governments. In this way, public authorities, official bodies, and those in the government will rule over you in a way that has never happened before, meaning that you will no longer chart the course of your own fate in the collective, because this will be done by those who exercise total power and control over you. In this way, every one of you will be a servant and a slave of authorities, public bodies and governments, or of those people in power and their vassals who possess power in this respect. So, that's what the Meyer material says is probably actually happening even as we speak. And that's why I've done so many shows on the might of our own thoughts, so that we can become independent thinkers again, evolve our consciousness, and get ourselves out of the mess that we're in now. I am going to play a lot of clips on this afternoon's show, all of these around this idea of mind control and electronic data chips. Here we go.
Last week, Obama come out again and say we want, this brain program, and announce what's been around for decades, a rolling out of brain chips, and sure, it could be great to the blind to see, brain damage. The problem is they build back doors into everything. What is your take on the public rollout of DARPA and the brain chips?
Well, we've been talking about this, as you know, for 18 years with you on the air and many, many others. The fact is they're masking the true intentions behind these so-called great, wonderful breakthroughs. And while they are, this is a double-edged sword, and one that will stab us in the eye and not give us a clear vision, I can tell you. DARPA has been involved, starting with just microcircuits that would allow them to track special forces, congressional leadership. The Mexican government, even 200 of their top bureaucrats were implanted with chips years ago so they could track all their movements. These are much, much more sophisticated, and they go back to the idea of controlled effects, which came out of at least DARPA, as well as the Electromagnetic Directorate of the Air Force. Back in June of 2004, there was an article published in Technology Horizons, produced by the Air Force, talking about this very thing, and the idea of creating synthetic memory where you would, the good side is they're saying, well, we can knock out all this war trauma and, sort of wipe the memories clean of foreign fighters, coming back, into the U.S. The problem is, what else do you wipe clean?
It's total mind control.
This is the worst of the worst. The idea of creating synthetic memory. What's going to happen in courtrooms when people raise their right hand and swear that what they say is true when they can't distinguish the synthetic memory from the real memory? This is the big challenge for this republic, is what is it going to do as they roll each of these things out, and how much more can the government conceal when they can literally wipe and replace memory? This is where it's headed. This is where it's going. Beyond that is the idea of synthetic telepathy, which are contracts that were led by DARPA to the University of California several years ago. You and I reported on this. These have moved forward to actually allow you to transfer signals, brain signals, so you can actually read a person's thoughts at a distance and send them information at a distance. Now, for communication with our own troops, some people may see some merit in this. From the standpoint of foreign troops and intervention, imagine a foreign army all of a sudden having thoughts of God telling them what to do or what have you. These are the very kind of things that we've been talking about for over 18 years.
And everything used on the military and deployed overseas will be deployed here first. The microwave guns, the tracking systems. This is already, I remember DARPA, it was like 14 years ago in the Baltimore Sun, and it was like a science fiction movie back then. It was like Twilight Zone music was playing almost when I read it on air. They said DARPA's practicing with different wavelengths out of cell tower arrays to calm the public. And then I read that on air, and it sounded crazy, but it was in the news as a test. How far advanced is this really from the patents and the research you've done? Obviously, if they're telling us about it now, how far along is this attack on free will?
They've already engaged it, both in the private sector and the public sector. To change emotional states of the population is really easy. And you can even go back to Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, Between Two Ages. When he was at Columbia University in the early 70s, he published a book where he talked about mind control. In fact,
technotronic era.
Right, and you can look at that book. And he, people don't remember, he was National Security Advisor to Jimmy Carter. He's one of the founders of the Trilateral Commission. He is a globalist of globalists. This guy, if you read that book today, you'd swear it was a history on what happened in terms of technology, society, and politics literally around the world, because everything he predicted came true. This area, goes back decades, but where it is now is a very, very fine science. We've been able to replicate various functions of the brain, be able to do this synthetically through electronic circuits. And the resolution, if you will, the ability to do this at a finer and finer and finer level increases as our computer power increases. So when you think about this, to do what the brain does, say in 1980, no way. The technology wasn't there. To do it now with the advent and the emergence of supercomputers, you're going to be able to create machines that think like humans, that act like humans. You're going to be able to download your memory set.
Let me ask you this. If they're 25 to 40 years ahead, depending on the technologies we know about in corporate and institutional redoubts, I see the Internet, Dr. Begich, with the billions of people that are interfacing. It can predict the future, almost 100% mass movements, 97% they admit in individual movements. That's almost beyond human intelligence in some respects. Obviously, ours is much more advanced in other ways, to be able to think of new things, to have love, to tell what's good from bad, to enjoy a sunset. But is it the Internet interfacing with humans, in my view, a new life form and is already artificially intelligent?
Yeah, I would say so. In fact, if you really look at it, as it expands, it will never be 100%. And that's the thing about this. It will never have 100% predictability because of the emotional factors and just the human factor.
The butterfly factor.
But we're going to become more and more reliant. And that reliance is going to lead to judgments that are not necessarily the right ones because they won't have that human factor in. I mean, on one hand, things are expanding, but at the same time as they're expanding, the secrecy syndrome within government is expanding as well. That's the root of the problem. Government cannot be trusted. My family's been in it. I've been exposed to it my entire life. The first advice that my brother would give you as a U.S. Senator is, don't trust any of them, and that's coming from a guy on the inside.
Hi, I'm Shane Steiner. A lot of you have been following my progress using Super Male Vitality. The last 19 weeks has been an incredible experience. I was feeling a little down and lethargic during the holidays, and none of the supplements that I was taking were doing any good. That's when my longtime friend from high school, Alex Jones, introduced me to Super Male Vitality. I was a little skeptical at first. Not only would I have the energy to work out and go to the gym, but it was actually the changes were happening to my body a lot more rapidly. My whole mood, my libido, everything had completely changed. The concentrated organic herbs, they stimulate your natural systems to produce the natural hormones that you need. I just really wanted to bulk up and hit it hard, and I went in for about the first 5 weeks and was lifting heavy weight and just really hitting it hard, and I gained 20 pounds of muscle immediately. Since that, I've decided I was going to lose some weight and slim down. I just changed up my workout a little bit, and 35 pounds came on.
Brain-machine interfaces, a technology that marks the beginnings of a new kind of man, the cyborg, the robot man. Neuro-robotic technology can be applied in different directions. The brain controlling the machine, or, inversely, the machine controlling the brain.
So we're just going to go through each one of these arms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's do all of those. And how this goes.
But a third option is also possible. One brain controlling another brain via the interface. How does this work in the case of the robot rat? All you need, in fact, are 3 well-positioned electrodes.
You need a website. Why not do it yourself?
2 electrodes in the sensory cortex of the rat send stimuli to the zones connected to its whiskers. When the rat follows the signal sent to its left side and turns in that direction, it is rewarded with a discharge into its pleasure zone. This discharge produces a flow of dopamine, providing instant pleasure. This zone is also called the brain's reward center. We possess a reward center too, just like the rat. In the process of creating a cyborg, this is square one. If we send a stimulus to the zone related to the hand, we create a sensation in that area. In the same way, via the motor cortex, we can provoke an involuntary movement. In Boston, the first machine-brain interface trials have already been conducted on paraplegic patients. Thanks to an electrode chip called the brain gate, they can operate a computer remotely by thought. So it's no coincidence that these researches are partly funded by DARPA, the U.S.'s Defense Research Agency. Neuroscience will bring us the soldier of the future.
This is a new deal, gentlemen. Enemy center of gravity is downtown.
Just get a good view from here.
A remote-controlled soldier? A soldier who in the midst of the battle can be sent crucial data and information downloaded into his brain? A soldier who can control his fears? We are going to reach a level of control. The more we learn about the brain, the more researchers discover how little our consciousness and our way of living might be completely transformed by the convergence of neuroscience, genetics, and nanotechnology.
There is a much larger secret being kept from the American people and the world regarding the implantable microchip technology. We are all now aware of the implantable RFID microchips, which are public knowledge and official law soon to be mandatorily forced upon all of humanity. However, there yet lays a deeper secret regarding these implantable microchips, in that the standard RFID microchip is not the only implantable microchip soon to be forced upon humanity. There currently is advanced cybernetics technology being experimented on human beings, which allows for technological bypassing of the human brain, essentially enabling remote control of human beings via computer. They've already mapped out basic functions of the brain like movement, and are able to artificially mimic the electrical charges via implanted electrodes, to cause involuntary movement along any directed path, In addition to even more horrifying aspects of this technology, some are familiar with brain-computer interface technology, allowing some humans to communicate via computer or to move artificial limbs via thought. However, we are not told that this is a two-way street and the technology can be used not only in the direction of brain to computer, but also from computer to brain. Cybernetic implantable nano-microchips can technologically bypass the human brain, thus providing the ultimate neutralization tool. Over the coming decades, we will see humans getting cybernetic augmentation and brain-computer interfaces that'll enable them to connect to the internet via thought. Currently, there are no safeguard for individuals already connected to the system and no defense against being hacked and remotely controlled by outside rogue factions. The Bible refers to the cybernetic brain microchips as the mark in the forehead, while the RFID chip is referred to as the mark in the hand. Speak out against the regime, and this technology can be used to eliminate you without you ever knowing what happened and there being no smoking gun to point to the government. People called the RFID microchip a theory a decade ago. Well, now it is official law. They called a coming gun grab a theory. However, we all know better after all we are seeing in these perilous times. The full spectrum of this technology is beyond horrifying in its capabilities to eliminate people the regime deems troublesome. Humanity can't afford to allow this tech to reach full implementation. It would be like playing a video game to them. However, the real-life human would be you. Humanity has reached the singularity, and all human beings will be plugged into a supercomputing system similar to the Skynet system depicted in Terminator. First, we need to realize that this technology is currently being used and is planned for all of humanity, and begin to understand the total implications of how this technology can devastate humanity if left in the wrong hands. We must gather up all the human lab rats currently under experimentation and evaluate whether the technology has been used for good or evil. Considering it is being used to create real-life zombies and assassins, we all know the answer to that question. Our main focus should be to make sure that this technology comes under public regulation, because currently the military-industrial complex has thousands and thousands of cyborg sleeper agents all around the world that don't know they were ever cybernetically augmented. So at a moment's notice they can be activated and turned into remote-control drones for various missions. This creates problems for society the likes of which humanity has never seen before and is currently unable to handle. Imagine if someone in the covert agencies thought it would be funny to have thousands of people all across the world start eating other human beings. How could any of the current social structures respond to this? People wouldn't even realize that this is simply advanced technology and all society would fall apart. There must be a citizen initiative to bring awareness of this technology and regulations put in place to prevent people from being hacked any further. Currently, the cybernetics radio frequencies used by the military-industrial complex fall within the same ranges of the commercial industry, thus allowing people to feel other forms of technology. This is an accidental indicator that the covert agencies are currently working to correct, but until they do, this is a godsend warning to those already cybernetically microchipped, telling them that somebody put technology into their heads. Whatever the brain controls can be technologically bypassed via computer, creating real-life drone human beings. The entirety of humanity will see this sooner or later, no matter how much some may deny it now. Singularity is the future, and we are humanity's resistance, and the fate and direction of the singularity is in our hands to determine whether it will be used for good or evil. As long as this technology remains unknown and unregulated, the doors for misuse are left wide open, and humans will continue to be hacked all across their globe. We must form a citizens' intelligence network of sharing info and learning to bring about safeguards for cybernetic RFID brain microchips, or else the ramifications of cybernetics will be beyond Orwellian. Let not these words fall upon deaf ears, but see what the regime has planned beyond the horizon, to subjugate all of humanity. We must unite all the strength in our collective being to push back and resist the looming Orwellian tyranny. Good skill and Godspeed.
We possess a reward center too, just like the rat. If we send a stimulus to the zone related to the hand, we create a sensation in that area.
all of the things we talked about when I was, your on-air co-worker, all those things have happened. And people don't either care or they didn't listen or whatever. It doesn't matter. Other things that we talked about and other things that we're now seeing are going to happen. The dollar is not going to last. So what does the world look like? We have two ways to go. We can either tear each other apart, or we can see that world that Amazon was talking about last night on 60
Isn't that amazing?
Where literally the sky is the limit. Everything is about to change.
When you look at the state of the economy, Obamacare, the disaster, the rise in the ever-growing government, deficits, debt, doubling of the people on welfare, what do you think in the privacy? I know you spend a lot of time reading and you now become a student of history. What do you think privately is going to happen to this country?
I think that we are
in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that we are in a situation that we will either rise to the occasion and be our best selves. I saw something that happened over the weekend, Sean, a poll that came out. I know you must have talked about it today. 70% of Americans don't trust each other. They think only 30% of this country you can trust. If that remains true, will we then become Europe?
We see signs that with the noblest of intentions, the Obama administration is in a kind of headlong retreat from the kind of global engagement that, in our view, offers the best hope for peace. Quick final thought from you, because you say openly in your essay that you're reserving judgment on all of this as we learn more over the next several weeks. But one of the things that you talk about in a broader perspective is global powers trying to rearrange themselves into a new global world order.
What we're seeing is a kind of a concerted pushback by these three countries. I think we have to watch it carefully to see whether, in fact, this is the opening of a new moment in international history.
Very interesting. Walter?
Whether, in fact, this is the opening of a new moment in international history.
New mystery surrounding One World Trade Center. For about a year, New Yorkers have reported hearing an eerie sound coming from the newly constructed building. They call it haunting, and it's got a lot of people talking. Rick Leventhal joins us now. So, Rick, you went down there. You did some investigative work. What did you learn?
Well, there's clearly a noise. It's not clear exactly where it's coming from. It can create a sound that some are calling eerie, haunting, even moaning. The whistling was first reported by the Tribeca citizen on the day after Thanksgiving. A man who lives a couple blocks from the almost completed One World Trade Tower wrote a local paper and said he first heard the sound during Hurricane Sandy last year and assumed it would be eliminated when the building's framework was finished and the windows installed. Well, then, last week in the middle of the night, the neighbor says the tower began whistling again with a slightly different two-toned cry, calling it unmistakable and very chilling. So here it is, and you can judge for yourself.
One of them is the mechanical mismatch between humans and electronics, right? So electronics are boxy and rigid, humans are curvy and soft. That's a mechanical mismatch problem. Well, a researcher at the University of Illinois, his name is Dr. Rogers, what he did is he founded a company and they started making electronic tattoos. So I'm wearing one here on my arm.
Do we have a camera to get a...
This is a developmental system made by MC10, and it has an antenna and some sensors embedded in it. And what we plan to do is work with them to advance a tattoo that could be used for authentication. Now, it may be true that 10 to 20-year-olds don't want to wear a watch on their wrist, but you can be sure that they'll be far more interested in wearing an electronic tattoo, if only to piss off their parents. That's something that you wear, but you could also imagine including authentication in just your daily habits. So I take a vitamin every morning. What if I could take vitamin authentication?
What?
Vitamin authentication. Look, I have one right here. Well, here, I'll let you hold it. Would you like to hold it?
I'll hold it.
Okay. So this...
You guys see it?
This pill has a small chip inside of it with a switch. And they power it up. And the switch goes on and off. and it creates an 18-bit ECG-like signal in your body, and essentially your entire body becomes your authentication token. Yes, this is true.
Okay, but...
Okay, so wait. So it's really true. So what this means is that becomes my first superpower. I really want this superpower. It means that my arms are like wires, my hands are like alligator clips. When I touch my phone, my computer, my door, my car, I'm authenticated in. First superpower. Like, I want that.
This is FDA cleared?
So here's the thing. This is not science fiction. This pill is actually made by a company called Proteus, and they've developed it for medical applications. That pill has been CE stamped and cleared by the FDA.
Does Google now know everything I do and everywhere I go? Because let's face it.
If you have never heard of Bitcoin, you are probably not alone, but the online currency is gaining popularity around the world. And now, in eastern Kentucky, WINT's Brittany Nada looked into the cyber money to try and answer some questions about how it works.
City commissioners in Vico recently passed a measure to pay its police chief in Bitcoin. It may be a forward-thinking movement, but many of you probably do not understand how it works.
Bitcoin is a new currency traded against the dollar, yen, euro, and every other currency around the world.
Israel is ready for historic peace, and it's a peace based on two states for two peoples. It's a peace that Israel can and must be able to defend itself by itself with our own forces against any foreseeable threat.
In the days and weeks ahead, we will consult very closely and continually with our Israeli friends in order to bring about a comprehensive agreement that can withstand everybody's test.
FBI is rolling out a $1 billion facial recognition system. This high-tech program has been undergoing testing since February. It compiles mug shots, iris scans, and more, and is finally said to be ready for launch.
You know, the FBI is now revealing its next generation, if you will, effort to weed out the bad guys. As you mentioned, $1 billion. They've put it to the test so far in several states since February. Now, the system works in two ways. It can compare an image to the FBI's massive database of mugshots to pinpoint criminals. It can also track suspects in surveillance footage by honing in on their faces in a crowd. There are those opposed to the idea, though, such as Democratic Senator Al Franken, who suggests the database raises serious privacy issues. Several public advocates are also wary of the project, fearing it will eventually extend beyond criminals to include images of the innocent. It is nationally implemented by the year 2014, John. So
wow, fascinating.
They may be looking at you.
Let's hope not.
A new crime-fighting tool is so big, some might call it a tank.
Hey, I think they are. Now, it's really called an MRAP. I checked on that. And tonight, these massive military vehicles are in the hands of 4 mid-state police agencies.
A handful of police departments are now getting them free of charge to protect their officers. Hendersonville's SWAT team already has 2 Humvees. The problem is they're not armored. The MRAP gives them that much-needed protection.
We plan to paint it black, just the same as our other tactical vehicles, and put police markings on it, and that's probably all we're going to do.
Sir, I want to talk to you. Do not arrest me.
All right, sir. Stay right there. He's under arrest. Stay right there. Back up, back up. Hey, guys, if you cross this line, you'll be under arrest, so don't do it. Amy, we're going to get you out of here very soon. Yes, we have everything.
This was, Amy, a reporter being arrested by police who were dressed like stormtroopers out of a Steven Spielberg movie. What was your experience? What were your thoughts? And And how do you think that we got here from 20, 30 years ago when this kind of thing was pretty much unheard of?
You had these police officers going after thousands of peaceful protesters, eviscerating the encampments, tear gassing, pepper spraying, beating people in the streets. And this all has to be reimagined. I mean, police have to be challenged. There are many good cops who don't feel that that's their role. And it's our job in the media to cover them.
I think so. And Matthew, I'm curious, in the minute we have left, at what point in time did America start militarizing our police and why?
Well, I don't think there's going to be anyone who can point to a specific minute, but I think a lot of it has to do
around
with
the time the Dirty Harry movies.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we started waging this crazy war on drugs. I think
PayPal's global head of developer evangelism, Jonathan LeBlanc, is pushing implantable brain chips as a replacement for passwords, but insists that such technology must be made to fit inside cultural norms before it is accepted by the general public. In a presentation called Kill All Passwords, LeBlanc admits that the future of authentication security is, quote, going to get creepy as traditional passwords are phased out due to their innumerable security flaws. LeBlanc envisages using brain chips to measure thought patterns so that childhood memories could be invoked by the user to unlock their computer.
If you're measuring thought patterns, think of the future of identification on that source. You walk up to your computer and go to unlock it, and what happens is I'm thinking of a memory back when I was a child, and that's my unlock code. Brain patterns directly to laptop. Amazing piece of identity and something that really no one can have because it's a memory.
LeBlanc also discusses how biohacking companies are already using embedded NFC and RFID tags to unlock doors. In January, the BBC reported on a company in Sweden that was implanting its workers with computer chips under the skin in order for them to access the building.
It's making our lives easier. I think people will actually welcome this tool to make their lives easier.
And is there a sort of wider philosophy behind it?
We are early adopters of this technology. We experiment with it. We learn it, how it works, because I think that there might be a day when the tax man or the big corporates will come to us and say, hey, try this chip, try this implant. And then we, the biohackers who understand this technology, we will be able to question their proposals.
Daily ID chips with Wi-Fi sensors could also be swallowed by employees to provide secure authentication, says LeBlanc. PayPal is currently working with partners to get the ball rolling on such technology, a process LeBlanc says is part of the payment processor becoming a thought leader on the transition. I can't speculate as to what PayPal will do in the future, but we're looking at new techniques. We do have fingerprinting scanning that is being worked on right now, so we're definitely looking at the identity field, LeBlanc told the Wall Street Journal.
But realistically, the ones that will succeed, whether it's embeddable, ingestible, injectable, or what have you, are the ones that are going to play into cultural norms, the ones that are going to meet the demands of the populace overall, of all the people around, and not be creepy. So even though they seem creepy at the current time, the future are going to be the ones that hit those cultural norms.
LeBlanc's identification of cultural norms as a major hurdle to be overcome before the public becomes comfortable with wearable ID technology or implantable chips echoes similar sentiments made by Google executive Regina Duggan. During a 2013 D11 conference, Duggan said that Google was working on an ingestible microchip that would turn a user's entire body into a biological authentication system for cell phones, cars, doors, and other devices. The company is also developing a wearable e-tattoo that can decipher a user's thoughts by detecting the unvocalized words in their throat.
Does Google now know everything I do and everywhere I go? Because, let's face it, we like you guys, but you're from Google.
Just give him some water and let him take that.
Duggan predicted that young people would want to adopt the e-tattoo if it was made to look cool and was seen as a form of rebellion against their parents.
It may be true that 10 to 20-year-olds don't want to wear a watch on their wrist, but you can be sure that they'll be far more interested in wearing an electronic tattoo, if only to piss off their parents.
Duggan's role in developing such technology can be placed in a somewhat sinister context, given that she is the former director of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, an agency of the U.S. Department of Defense, which many see as a pioneer of a dystopian Big Brother surveillance society. Google CEO Eric Schmidt even suggested earlier this year that the internet itself could one day disappear as an external concept, greasing the skids for the World Wide Web to exist inside people's brains. In December 2013, Google engineering director Scott Huffman also predicted that within 5 years, web users would have microphones attached to their ceilings and microchips embedded in their brains in order to perform quicker internet searches. Would you swallow an identification pill or have one embedded in your brain for greater password security and convenience? How could such technology be abused by governments and corporations? Let us know in the comments below. Check out the other videos, subscribe to the channel. I'm Paul Joseph Watson for Infowars.com.
Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm joined right now by Dr. Peter Breggin. Now, as an introduction, reading from his bio here, since 1964, he's been publishing peer-reviewed articles and medical books in his subspecialty of clinical psychopharmacology. This is someone who has clearly spoken out for a very long time, was at the forefront of telling people about the harmful, counterproductive effects of SSRI drugs, how it was driving people to suicide and to mass murder. And we have been trying to tell people for the longest time that the common link in all these mass shootings are the drugs. And yet the big pharmaceutical companies and the media that feed off of the big pharmaceutical companies, look at how many of the commercials are paid for by big pharmaceutical companies. Of course, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. But we've been trying to tell people what's behind that. But I also wanted to talk to Dr. Breggin about lobotomies, high-tech lobotomies that DARPA is working on, because he's been someone who's been at the forefront of pushing back against that. And as we see veterans doing many, many tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, as we see now that that is starting to fire up again. We were just talking to Paul Joseph Watson about how we see this mission creep now in terms of, it was first not going to be any troops sent back to Iraq. Now it's going to be 300. Now Obama's saying 500. Now we're getting emails from people saying their entire unit is being trained for deployment within the next few months going back to Iraq. So it looks as they're going to continue to escalate that, continue to keep Afghanistan going on for decades. And so we have a lot of veterans who are suffering from PTSD. And we understand that in the aftermath of World War II, the VA and was treating people who came back, vets who came back with PTSD. They were treating a lot of them with lobotomies. And now we see that DARPA says that they're going to be able to use brain chips to selectively remove memories. And of course, as you start reaching for something to make you wake up from this nightmare when you hear that the government is going to start messing with people's memories, implanting false memories, removing other memories, when that starts to scare you, they say, oh, don't worry. This is for PTSD. And, of course, we heard that with lobotomies. And Dr. Breggin was very much a part of the fight in the 1970s in an international campaign to stop the resurgence of lobotomies. And so I wanted to ask him first about that. Dr. Breggin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. This could be a very important show. It's the first time that I'm going to be talking about DARPA. Thanks to you. And I have just a huge amount of background on this. This isn't the first time that government agencies have funded what is essentially mind control. Mm-hmm. Back in the 1970s, the Justice Department and the National Institute of Mental Health, quite a combination, funded psychosurgery at Harvard, where they were implanting electrodes into the brains of people that were supposed to be patients but were experimental subjects. They were stimulating parts of the brain. They were obliterating parts of the brain by heating the electrodes. They had people walking around the ward being stimulated without their knowing it by remote control. And one of the heroes of DARPA is a fellow named Jose Delgado, who was sort of the godfather of these Harvard programs. And I conducted an international campaign that actually shut down the Harvard program. And I'm proud to say I actually drove Jose Delgado back to Spain back in the early 70s. So this is an old goal. Then we had the CIA. So we moved from the Justice Department and NIMH to the CIA, funding experiments in Canada with D.E. Cameron, who was a very famous psychiatrist. Even though a Canadian, he was at one point the president of our American Psychiatric Association. He had CIA funds to treat people when he was actually obliterating their memories with shock treatment, then using recorded devices to try to reprogram people and redevelop their personalities. Now, in both these projects, what they really succeeded in doing was destroying the brains of people and destroying their lives. The final, to sum up with the final version of all of this that I got involved with was the Violence Initiative in 1994. My wife and I wrote a book about it called The War Against Children of Color. We found out that the federal government, starting with all of the health agencies, the Justice Department, and the Centers for Disease Control, that these organizations were getting were applying for huge federal funding as a group to go into America's inner cities to identify genetically and biochemically why little children in the inner cities would grow up to become violent. This was pure racism, and it was pure eugenics, which is the usual combination.
Yes. And
Ginger and I worked, for several years to stop that program, too. So this is now a reincarnation on a somewhat more sophisticated level of mind control, and the government's been at this for ages.
But, of course, we don't have to worry about it now because it's so high-tech. It's like the way they sold the drone strikes, saying they were going to do surgical strikes, and yet we see entire wedding parties being taken out. I mean, it's still not a surgical strike. And if they say they're going to be able to go in and selectively mess with people's minds because they've now got some kind of brain chip, a semiconductor that they can use as opposed to doing surgery, it is no less destructive. People need to understand that, you can kill people from a bomb out of a B-52, or you can kill them from a Predator drone. You can destroy their minds with a lobotomy surgery, or you can destroy their minds with a high-tech brain chip. And you're talking about the minorities. We just recently had a report about a government agency funding research on premature babies, varying the amount of oxygen to them and giving some of them too much oxygen, making them blind, and some of them depriving them of oxygen to brain damage them. I mean, that came out, and that was being targeted. Most of the cases where they were talking to people were minority people. They came in, and they actually, Dr. Bregan, created an acronym called SUPPORT. And they told him, we're with the support group, and they had this little acronym as cover. And these people thought they were just a support group. They were going to be coming in, holding their hands, offering them counseling and that sort of thing, when actually they were signing on, they were deceiving them into signing on to a situation where their child was going to be damaged by this deprivation of oxygen or too much oxygen.
Yeah, it's just opportunistic. They go after the minorities, partly from racism, but partly it's just flat-out opportunism. Let me quickly go down some of these DARPA programs. Can I do that for about 60
go ahead.
seconds here?
Definitely.
Well, first of all, DARPA is funded through Obama and through the military this time. Most of these other programs were through health agencies, the Justice Department, and so on. One project is to create a black box to implant in brains, very much like the one in airplanes. They'll keep track of your brain function and then even be able to retrieve it after you've died to look at what happened to you.
They monitor all of our emails and all of our conversations. That's not enough for them. They have to keep a record and, I guess, store it out in Utah. They have to store it for the NSA, even what we think, I guess, right?
Yeah, my wife Ginger, who works closely with me on these issues and on was the heart and soul behind the Stopping the Violence initiative against black children, was just pointing this out to me today. They want to start with our conversations, but really where they want to go is inside our heads.
Absolutely.
So one of them is the black box. Another is interface between brains, where they want people to be able to communicate and influence each other's brains. Another is influencing brains, and they've been trying to do this with animals, animal brains influencing animal brains, the internet influencing animal brains. They've got another one about stimulating for lost memories. You mentioned the one where they can put in chips and then destroy the chips, which would destroy the person.
Yes. And
the one that I think is the most key, because this is where the drug companies are going to jump on. This is where all the money is really eventually going to go. And that's a project called Subnets. And that's, at this point, a $70 million DARPA project to use brain implants to identify mental disorders like depression, PTSD, addiction.
Yeah,
They're going to study what's wrong with brains and then fix the brains. This is subtle lobotomy. And you know, what we call mental illnesses are not physical in origin. A soldier who comes back full of guilt and shame and horror of war and has what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not a disorder, it's just post-traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. It's what happens to a normal person with a normal brain when you put them through war.
Exactly.
So they redefine human experiences. Depression is loss of hope. It's profound sadness. It's a feeling of helplessness. All of these understandable human processes are not biological in origin. And when they go in there and tinker, what they're eventually going to do is just very crude control and mostly destruction.
Yes. And the other thing that concerns me is that if they did get a finer means of control, I think that their ultimate goal is to try to make people who absolutely have no conscience or remorse about what they will do, who will do anything that they're told, whether that's because they've got some kind of a brain chip in them that is forcing them to do it, or whether they've removed any guilt, any moral conscience that person might have. I think that's the thing that really scares me, because when we look at these experiments, whether you're talking about the Tuskegee experiments that everybody knows about, or some of these that are just recent and a lot of people don't understand about, this preemies experiment on the premature babies, or just as I was coming to InfoWars, they had the EPA was experimenting on people, feeding them diesel fumes. And this was done in an effort to try to up their regulations for fine particulate matter. They were selectively screening for people who had respiratory and heart issues because they wanted to increase the regulation of fine particulate matter. These are people who have no moral conscience, and I think they're trying to, ultimately, that's what they would like to see happen with others. We're going to be right back with Dr. Peter Breggin. We're talking about the history of mind control and lobotomies and how that's been abused. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm joined with Dr. Peter Breggin. This is a man who has, for many years, warned about the negative effects, the unintended consequences of SSRI drugs, making the symptoms worse, being the major contributing factor to many suicides and mass murders. But this part of the program, we've been talking to him about something else that he's been involved in fighting, and that is lobotomies. And now we see that President Obama has this $100 million initiative, the BRAIN initiative, that DARPA is pushing through. And, of course, just as they used this phony acronym of support to try to deceive people who were the parents of premature babies into signing on to this program that was going to essentially deprive their premature babies of oxygen or give them too much oxygen, both of them having severe consequences, even death. They deceived them by coming up with this acronym called support. Well, Obama's got his own acronym for this DARPA program. The BRAIN initiative actually stands for Brain Research through Advancing Innovative Neurotechnologies. And, of course, what this looks like to me when they're talking about changing people's memories, when they're talking about selectively removing memories, this looks like the very crude approach that they did after World War II to veterans with lobotomies. I was just talking to Dr. Breggin about that. Dr. Breggin, they want us to believe that they have something that is very advanced and very precise surgically, electronically. Now we have high technology to take care of this. But as you're pointing out, this is just going to be more of the same, isn't it?
Yeah, let me address for a minute just how complex and amazing and poorly understood the brain is.
Yes.
You know, the brain has perhaps 100 billion cells, nerve cells. Now, these are just the communicating cells, not all the superstructure. They may have up to 10,000 connections, each one. We're talking about trillions of connections going on in the brain. We have so little understanding of the brain, David, that there is no famous brain scientist. If you think about Newton or Einstein or Galileo, all the great names of the physical universe, there are none for the brain because we don't understand how the brain works. We don't understand its operating system. We don't know how it creates language or thoughts or feelings. It's a very dark area. It's a mysterious area. It should be treated with the utmost respect, and we should avoid any kind of tampering inside the brain. The brain, each of our brains is probably more complicated than the entire physical universe because life is so complicated. The universe doesn't speak. It doesn't think. It's simple compared to a human brain. And we need to back off and say, if we're going to do basic research, it has to be on the simplest, genuine neuroscientific level of how does a neuron work, how many connections does it have, what are the chemical influences on it. We can't just stumble into the brain like it's a china shop that we're indifferent toward, barge around breaking things. We won't succeed in what they want to do. They won't succeed in fine-tuning people's brains, but they will succeed in developing the ability to injure brains and probably to make people docile.
Yes.
Because the main effect is docility and apathy when you harm the brain.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and I don't know how you view this, but I look at this and I think for them to come out and say that they're going to do it through DARPA, which is loosely tied to the defense aspect of it. Of course, they do a lot of things with robots that scare us as well. But when they say they're going to treat PTSD, I think they're just looking to use veterans as guinea pigs. And you're talking about bull in a china shop. I mean, they're going to put this chip in here and just experiment on these people in a real brute force kind of way.
Oh, absolutely. When I started the anti-psychosurgery campaign, they were doing psychosurgery at NIMH. They were doing psychosurgery at the VA. I stopped all of that, but they weren't trying to treat people.
No.
They were experimenting. They were trying to develop their sense of power and authority over human beings. It's an evil approach to human beings. It's an objectifying of our basic nature, which is very spiritual. And whether you believe in evolution or God or both, I mean, our brain has to do with our will. It has to do with our values. It has to do with who we are.
Dr. Bregan is someone who has fought against the brutalities of lobotomies that were performed on World War II veterans for the same justification, to help them with PTSD. So we've been talking about what's likely to come out of that. I want to continue that discussion with Dr. Bregan, but before we do, I want to tell you this hour of the Alex Jones Show is brought to you by My Patriot Supply. You know, the collapse of the border, the soaring meat prices, it's clear that there is no longer time to wait. You need to start getting prepared today. Go to mypatriotsupply.com and check out their complete line of preparedness products. My Patriot Supply is the home of the Patriot Pantry.
Folks, you've been listening to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We're taking a look at brain chips, the role of DARPA, mind control, RFID chips. Even PayPal wants to put brain chips in people so that they can use PayPal. We started the show out, as I often do, talking about the writings of this farmer in Switzerland. His name is Edward Albert Meyer. He's written something like 39 books and over 600 booklets. One of those books is called The Goblet of Truth, and it warns of this coming time when we will be implanted with electronic data chips. And let me again read from the Goblet of Truth here. Therefore, as never before in the history of earthly humanity, lying and deception, as well as deceit, falseness, as well as servitude through the government will be held as the truth, and an ever greater calamity will be built upon it. And it will be increasingly the case that you people will be treated like animals for the slaughter, implanted with electronic data chips by means of which you will be controlled and robbed of freedom by authorities, public offices, governments. Although in your ignorance you will think that you live as free people, although you are in fact servants of the governments. Well, folks, I hope you found this very interesting. I just played a lot of clips and let them roll. A lot going on this side of the microphone, so I had to do this today. And sometimes it's kind of nice to do this, gives me a break, and you can hear a confirmation of the Meyer material from other sources. Kind of takes me out of the picture, which is very nice. In any case, enjoy that weather, and hopefully we can talk soon. Again, this is Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder, and we will see you very soon. Have a good day.